Naofumi Iwatani, one of the most renowned scientists of his generation. Naofumi has been hunting and clawing for a certain experiment. He's been getting loans, grants, anything he possibly can to do something great. Something with human genetics. Maybe, just maybe, he can manipulate human genetics to the point that you can become more than one being. During this experiment, he had a catastrophe happen. A crazy accident that turned Naofumi, well, more or less insane. Naofumi Iwatani may have been obsessed with his work, but not this obsessed. Over the years, he became more and more crazy of basically trying to find out how this would exactly work, until one day, he was reading in one of his books, and a light began to glow, reading about Naofumi, the legendary clone hero. And that's what we're going to get into right now. Naofumi's body glows, and he teleports to a brand new world. He arrives behind this large cage-like area, and Naofumi looks to his left to see three other people. Someone with a spear, someone with a sword, and someone with a bow. He begins to get confused until these knights approach them, saying that the king wants to speak with the four cardinal heroes. And Naofumi is shocked to hear this. Is he in another world? Is this even possible? He thought dimensional traveling like this was actually just a hypothesis, was just a theory. But it seems like that just happened. It seems like Naofumi and, well, everybody's thesis on this and everybody's theories on this were wrong. Whatever they just did, they just destroyed the bounds of science. But Naofumi doesn't say much about it as they're guided to the king's quarters or the king's throne. When they arrive, he begins to greet them, saying that it's a pleasure to have them there, but immediately the other three heroes begin to demand rewards, and Naofumi just listens in. But the king is confused, looking at Naofumi to see that Naofumi has nothing at all. He doesn't have a weapon, it seems. He just has a gem that is directly on his chest. And he's confused. Where's the shield hero? Why wasn't he summoned? And the other knights and the noblemen and everybody there, including the church, shrug, saying that maybe that's for the best. They introduce themselves as, obviously, as everybody does, and they introduce themselves as, obviously, the Ren, the sword hero, Monteyasu, the spear hero, Itsuki, the bow hero, and Naofumi, he's not sure what hero he is. He looks at his HUD and begins to figure it out. Naofumi is extremely smart, so he's able to figure this out in no time at all, and he figures out that he's labeled as the legendary clone hero. He explains that he's the clone hero. He's not sure what that entails, but it must be something interesting if he replaced the shield hero. And they all agree, and they begin talking about what they're here for. You all are here to save us. Save us from the waves of catastrophe. A series of demonic invasions that are tearing up this country and many others. We need your help. These waves are unstoppable, and with the help of the heroes, they should be able to be stopped. The heroes say that they will definitely help as long as they're given rewards, and Naofumi agrees with this as well. And the king says that they will be handsomely rewarded for their trouble. So they all agree, and since the night is coming very soon, they all head to a hotel room. They all relax, chill, and they begin speaking about where they came from and actually what type of video games they play. Naofumi explains though that he doesn't play video games. He actually was pretty good way back when he was a kid, but he is a world-renowned scientist that has been basically experimenting in various genetics and many other things. And they're shocked to hear this, thinking that Naofumi must be some sort of genius, in which he says he wouldn't call himself that, but to the naked eye, you can definitely say that. But Naofumi begins to basically exchange information with these people, learning about as much as they can. And that's until Naofumi and everybody else then heads to bed. They head to bed, and the next morning, they meet up at the castle once again in the palace. They walk in, and the king is waiting there with many, many people, and he begins to say that these people will choose where they want to go and what hero they want to follow. When he does just that, it seems like nobody chooses Naofumi. Naofumi says that it's fine, that he doesn't really mind, he'd like to run some tests anyways on this new power he has. And it would be kind of useless to have other people in the party if this power only means he can only use it for himself. He walks away after grabbing the money, which is a good portion, about 2,000 silver, and he leaves and immediately goes to a weaponsmith to try and get some armor. He asks the man by the name of Erhard for some recommendations, and he gives him just that. And well, Naofumi, as payment, gives him a tip, but also gives him some information. Gives him some information about how to make his weapons even better through a scientific perspective. Naofumi gives him that information, and Erhard is definitely happy to hear this and says he has one hell of a customer, and that Erhard will definitely be reaching out to Naofumi every so often, and if he needs anything, come right to him. Naofumi agrees and thanks him as he leaves, and he goes to see if he can basically destroy or defeat anything in terms of leveling up and gaining XP. He goes out and figures out that he's actually kind of weak. He has to punch things to kill it, and he actually can't seem to get a grasp on it, and he's curious, maybe he can get a weapon. He didn't really think about it at the time. Heading back up, trying to actually use a weapon from Erhard's shop, and it seems like he actually can. He feels kind of dumb. Of all things, how could he forget to just grab a weapon? So he actually pays for the most pristine weapon he possibly can use at the moment, which is just a simple longsword or a simple katana type of weapon. A sword should be useful enough, and he's able to slice through the balloon-like monsters with relative ease. But that is not the power he wants to use. He's no sword hero, he's not Ren, but he wants to learn more and more about his power, so he begins to do just that. For the night, he begins to eat dinner and drink on some wine as he begins to search and look up anything he possibly can know. He begins to look at all his powers. It seems like the clone hero has various other things. Not only can he clone himself, he can clone others, but also clone items, food, weapons. All that he can clone. And he begins to get interested in this. But how can he do such a thing? It seems like his cloning skills are broken down into various ways. He has his personal cloning. He has his outer cloning, which is he can basically clone other people, and that is at a level of 1, as well as the other is at a level 1. He has cloning items, which is at a level of 1, and a couple other clonings that are completely blurred out and sectioned off. It seems like his power ranges in various different ways, but he has to learn more and more. Maybe there's a way that he can clone how many arms he has. Maybe he can genetically modify himself through the use of this cloning-like power. He's not so sure yet, but what he does know is that he does need a party member. One day passes, and Naofumi decides to switch out his weapons. He feels like this longer sword is kind of hurting his mobility, and he should definitely be taking advantage of his already pretty decent speed. So he decides to switch it out for more of a handheld axe, something pretty basic, maybe even 2 tomahawk axes. So that's what he switches it out for, giving himself a lot more room to move around, just limiting his defense a lot more as well. But if he learns how to clone himself a lot, it won't even matter. So he begins to try to research how to use his cloning techniques, and he figures it out. It all has to do in the blood. So instead of testing on himself, he feels that it's for the best if he can find maybe a party member. But who is that party member? How could he convince a party member to join him? And that's when someone approaches him. A slave, trader, merchant, someone that owns a market full of slaves, introduces himself, saying that if Naofumi wants a party member, he can definitely get one. They walk into this room to see tons and tons of monsters, and Naofumi smirks. Slaves, huh? I guess they are legal in this world. That would be perfect. I don't need anything too strong. I'm a man with a keen eye. I need something that would be beneficial for a hero like me, but also beneficial to learn anything I possibly need to know about my powers. So eventually they stumble across Raphtalia, a little girl that is extremely sick. Naofumi pays for her and takes her away, explaining that he's going to cure that sickness and it will be easy enough. With the slave crest on, Raphtalia cannot say no to anything, so Naofumi gets her medicine, heals her up, and makes her feel slightly better, but then begins explaining something to her, that he needs to learn about his powers and that she will be the way to do that. She is kind of scared to hear this, and he says that all he really needs is some blood. She's terrified of this. She doesn't want to bleed. She's terrified of blood, and he says that it doesn't have to be a lot, just a little bit, and then everything will be fine. So he cuts her slightly, patches it up, and then emits the blood into the gem on his chest. Immediately he puts out his hand and can make a replica, no, a complete clone of Raphtalia. Raphtalia looks at the clone, but the clone doesn't act like Raphtalia. She acts on the command of everything. There is no free will in this clone, and she begins to panic, thinking that Naofumi is going to throw her away, and he says that she is very useful to him, and that he would never do that, and frankly, he needs her help to level up, so that maybe she can be safe eternally, but then not have to fight a thing. You wouldn't have to fight at all, Raphtalia. You can be safe. We can kick our feet back, sit down, eat food, and just have the clones fight for us. What does that sound like to you? That sounds like peace, right? No more hurting, Raphtalia. Nothing like that. Raphtalia nods in agreement, but even Naofumi can get this feeling that he's doing something wrong, and frankly, he has a lot of things in mind that he wants to do. He may be turning clones, and maybe part of this statement is correct, and maybe he does care to a certain extent, but frankly, these are experiments, and he wants to learn as much as he can possibly, but at the same time, manipulate the people closest to him to do exactly what he wants. So, throughout this next little bit, Raphtalia begins training. He gets Raphtalia new armor, a sword, and all of that, and they begin to level up at a decent rate. Eventually, they do run a little bit low on money, so they ask Erhard what would be the best spot to go to, and he points toward Loot Village. They head over to Loot Village and begin talking to the locals, and Naofumi begins to explain that he can definitely help them out around here as best they possibly can, as long as they help him as well. He explains that he just wants some help with some experiments. He just needs a drop of blood, and that's about it. So everybody gives him a drop of blood, and as he promises to protect their village, and he's able to create clones of everybody. But that's not the only thing. Every drop of blood he gets from a person, animal, anything. We're talking he levels up that skill. The clone skill is now at a level of 3, or at least the outward clone skill is at a level of 3, the skill that allows him to copy other people. So now when he copies a clone of Raphtalia, that clone is actually just as strong as Raphtalia. It mirrors the level, but it doesn't mirror the exact fight style of Raphtalia. It's still a little bit robotic, but the more levels he gains, the better it's going to get. They head to a mine that they've been suggested to go to, especially for some extra cash. But when they arrive, they realize that this is infested badly with some monsters. And a two-headed monster dog shows himself, and Raphtalia begins to freak out. This high-level dog monster, he begins to head to Naofumi and Raphtalia, and Naofumi begins to speak to her. Look, we have to kill it. If you want the world where we can just relax, be safe forever, you need to be able to defeat this thing. You need to help me fight these waves until I can get strong enough to the point where I can defend us both as if it was nothing. Please, Raphtalia, do that for me. Raftalia begins to wipe her tears and charges at the monster with Naofumi, and they're able to defeat it. Raftalia cries and hugs Naofumi, and Naofumi smiles, thinking that this is going perfectly well, taking all of the blood from the monster, injecting it into his gem, making a separate category: monster cloning. He has monster cloning now, and it seems like every single monster has its own cloning section. It seems that that monster has, based on the blood that Naofumi put into his gem, it actually has a level of level 6 cloning. So now he can clone that monster and have it attack people for a limited amount of time. This is perfect. The more Naofumi learns about this cloning and this use of his powers, the stronger he's gonna get. And all of it will matter in the long run, especially when he needs people to trust him, especially when he knows that he can have success in this world. It infatuates him, it excites him. He might have not been able to get far in his science in terms of genetic manipulation at his home world, but now he can create an entire world for himself if he if he works hard enough and so chooses to do so. A month then passes of Raftalia and Naofumi getting closer. Raftalia definitely has some feelings for Naofumi and feels very safe around him, and this is perfect. Naofumi wants this, and she does have a special place in his heart now, especially with the fact that she was basically his first experiment. Every so often, he takes little bits of blood from Raftalia, basically asking her for this blood, and of course she says yes. He makes sure not to take too much and not to hurt her at all, but more and more, Raftalia, the clone of Raftalia, is getting stronger and stronger, and basically that will be able to fight for her very soon if she chooses to not fight on her own. But with all that said and done, it's now basically time to prep for the next wave, or their first official wave. Naofumi and Raftalia head to check out to the capital's cathedral, which is obviously the Dragon's Hourglass, to see how much time between the waves, in which the other three heroes are there as well. Seeing Naofumi, questions start to be asked, and Motoyasu asks who this beautiful girl is, but Raftalia rejects him immediately, pushing him away and getting closer to Naofumi. In this, she is even closer to her master Naofumi, being completely and utterly loyal to him. It seems that his words really run deep within Raftalia, this idea that he presented in the very beginning. This idea that he could make clones of themselves, and eventually they wouldn't even have to fight. They could just be protected forever and live on forever. These clones could be their life, that they wouldn't have to raise a finger. And Raftalia believes to think that this is the way to go, that protecting everybody but not putting yourself in danger, that's what matters. That now she can live a happy life, but also protect the people that she wants to be protected, the people that are struggling, the people that could die just like her parents. And this runs deep within her brain this entire time. With that meeting over and knowing that there's 24 hours before the next wave, they get as much stuff as they possibly can to aid them in this, obviously, the wave. They then head over to Loot Village, and when they arrive, he begins to basically make tons of clones of the villagers. He explains that these villagers will take the place of them, and everybody else will go to a nearby place that is safe. And they're all shocked to see this. Wow, you're so amazing. You can make clones of us, and they're gonna fight, and you're gonna fight with them? And Naofumi explains that him, Raftalia, the clones of all of him, and some other clones he can conjure will definitely be enough to fend off this wave. Not to worry, and they can just sit back and relax, as long as they keep their promise to help out Naofumi from time to time. And they say, of course, that if everything goes to plan, of course, they'll be completely loyal to him, and he smiles and nods and thanks them for that. The wave then begins. Hornets, skeletons, zombies, anything you can think of have begin charging them throughout this village, but even the villagers are strong enough to fend them off. Naofumi is extremely strong, and Raphtalia is arguably probably slightly stronger than him, at least based on his level, but his techniques are amazing. And when they ever feel that there's a pushback, all he does is clone in the two-headed dog monster, who is extremely strong from the month of cloning and actually gaining strength. Naofumi just summons it in, and it begins to run and tear everything apart. And Naofumi watches on with Raphtalia as everything begins to get destroyed and killed. He explains to Raphtalia that this is what it's going to feel like in the near future. Him, her, whoever else joins their party that is loyal to them, they can sit back and watch as everything gets destroyed based on Naofumi's power, that he can do that for them. He can make sure that they're always safe. And Raphtalia and her eyes grow wide open, giving her a new realization that it can happen. It can truly happen. Being safe is not just an idea that Naofumi keeps bringing up. It's something that can truly happen in the near future. Well, with all that said, the catastrophe is over. The main hero, or the other three heroes, have killed the main boss, and the wave is now finished. The heroes are then invited to a state dinner, and Naofumi sits around Raphtalia, and they eat and all that good stuff. But that's until Mind decides to step in, informing Motoyasu that Raphtalia is a slave, prompting him to challenge Naofumi to a duel, saying that that is heinous, that something like this could even happen, that why would he have a slave? Raphtalia says that Naofumi protects her, and protects her with his life, and that it's obvious that he doesn't understand. But immediately she's like muzzled, and Naofumi is forced to agree to the duel. Naofumi's mad though. He is pissed, realizing that this person is trying to affect the plan he has for this world. He doesn't want to deal with this anymore. So they begin to fight, and Naofumi uses his more or less tomahawk-like axes to actually go toe-to-toe with Motoyasu. But it seems like he is put on the back foot pretty quickly. But that's okay, because Naofumi begins to summon clones of himself, overwhelming Motoyasu like it's nothing, and people begin to say that that's not fair, that it's a one-on-one duel. But Naofumi says that that's just part of his powers, that it still is a one-on-one duel. When Motoyasu stabs through one of the Naofumis, it poofs into smoke, and Naofumi continues his onslaught. But what Motoyasu doesn't realize, and what's occurring behind him, is the formation of a two-headed dog, and it's about to bite into Motoyasu. It bites into Motoyasu, picking him up, and he's bleeding like crazy. He gets tossed around like a rag doll, and Naofumi gets on top of him and begins punching him over and over and over again. As blood begins to spill out, Naofumi begins to absorb it into his gem, and everybody, they don't even notice this. They don't realize that Naofumi is actually absorbing this blood, but what he's doing is making a clone of Motoyasu himself, making a clone, and maybe there's a chance that he can even clone that little weapon he has there, and he can use it for his own good. He continues to spill blood of Motoyasu until he is basically disfigured on the face. Healing magic will definitely cure him, but god damn, broken nose, broken orbital, anything you can think of, Motoyasu is down for the counts, and all the blood that he's been lost is not even laying on the ground. It's all in the gem of Naofumi's. So Naofumi gets up, deemed the winner, and he absorbs all his clones, taking Raphtalia and leaving that place, before really anybody can even question him. Raphtalia says that was insane. She didn't realize how strong Naofumi has gotten, and Naofumi says that he can get even stronger. It's gonna take time, but he promises that they'll get to the point where it won't even matter. He'll protect them like it's nothing. But they should get someone else in their party to make things more efficient. She agrees, and they actually decide to go back to the slave merchant, eventually picking up an egg that is offered to him for a cheap price. That gotcha egg eventually turns into a Philolial, and Naofumi names the Philolial Philo. imprinting on Naofumi and reaching adulthood in a matter of days due to his skills and being a hero. They visit Loot Village, and it seems like Motoyasu and Mine are declaring the village under Motoyasu's rule. And they say that Naofumi is the one that resides here, and Naofumi, the clone hero, is the one that basically has their undivided attention and also their loyalty. Naofumi steps up and tells Motoyasu and Mine to leave now before there's trouble. And, well, Rautalia agrees, pulling out her sword, and Naofumi begins to summon clones. They say that they're not gonna budge, so he's gonna have to strike them down, and Naofumi says not to test him, that he really will. Motoyasu, you remember what happened last time we fought? Would you like that to happen again? I mean, it's an offer, right? Mine is actually taking offense to this threat, and Naofumi immediately drops, using his clones, he drops a bunch of the knights, killing most of them, but some of them are still basically breathing, and that's about it. Mine begins to panic, and a shadow appears, giving her something, and this forces her off even more. Motoyasu says that there's something wrong with that dude, and they leave with the people that at least are still alive. They then thank Naofumi, saying that without him it would be so hard to deal with these people, and he says that it's really no problem. As he says this, Philo grows another size, being past a fully grown Philolial. He's kind of confused. It's as if she's like some Philolial queen, and he begins to get excited though, and asks if they have maybe some sort of wagon, and they say they do, giving him that wagon. Now they can travel using using Philo's size and actually pull this wagon. But during this journey, they actually begin to take a rest, and when Naofumi wakes up, Philo is a little girl. He's shocked to see this and begins to panic, but Philo just says that it's her. It's Philo. And they're kind of confused, but Naofumi asks if he can actually absorb some of her blood, and of course she says yes, unconditionally. She doesn't really care. She trusts Naofumi entirely. So he takes some of her blood and actually analyzes it into his gem, really realizing that it seems like she was a Philolial and still is, but it's some sort of Philolial queen transformation of some sorts because he's one of the heroes. But that's cool to him. Sounds good, and it sounds like something that would be very beneficial in the next place. So he actually throws a towel over Philo, and they head back to Erhard to see if they can somehow get nice clothing for her. In which he sends them to the dressmaker, but that doesn't work. Sends him to the magic shop owner, which that doesn't work. But the magic shop owner does take an interest in Naofumi, thinking that he's very strong in magical affinities. It's very interesting. But that's not what they're there for. They need a magical gemstone now for the loom, so that she can make some magical thread. So while escorting the magic shop owner to that place, they find a wealthy trader. They pick him up, but it actually seems as if you could say this trader had some bad people coming for him. So a bandit group actually attacks their wagon, but they're defeated with ease. They gloat, saying that they'll basically put a bad name on Naofumi, and Naofumi says that that can't happen, that their blood will definitely be useful. He tells the magic shop owner and also the trader that they might want to turn around. Philo proceeds to actually kill all of them, and Naofumi basically turns them into mush, absorbing all of their blood. This will basically allow him to upgrade his base of cloning other people. So now if he gets a person or another party member like Philo, for instance, he doesn't have much blood in terms of her, but now a higher level, she'll actually start at a higher level when she's cloned because of all the excess blood he's using. And then of course he also can clone the bandits, but frankly those would just be death fodder, let's be honest. But with that said, they head off. They don't really blink an eye. Frankly, killing happens a lot in this world, especially with the waves. So they head off, and when they arrive, they begin to tell the wealthy trader that he does owe them something. So he begins to teach Naofumi some new skills, contacts, and even gives him or helps him gain a warrant for the mine at the quarry, even at a discount. Naofumi's party then begins to head over to this magic shop, or with the magic shop owner, and in search of the magic gemstone. But before that, they actually find an abandoned alchemist tomb which houses a cursed seed. That isn't good. If that cursed seed gets out, and wherever it is, it could be really bad, and wherever it is right now, it's probably running rampant on everything. But with that said, they fight through all the creatures in those tunnels using clones and anything, and Naofumi takes the blood from the bats, but realizes that, his clones work better than the bats. Once he gets leveled up, his clones can talk just like anybody else. He can make a Raphtalia clone that talks just like Raphtalia. That's just would be way more beneficial. He doesn't need these little bats. They find the gem vein, but it seems that the new is actually made a nest in it. Raphtalia says that she will handle this, and that she walks forward and stabs the new in the face and begins fighting it. It seems like Raphtalia can keep up relatively easily, and Naofumi goes to check what her level is. Holy, she's at a level of 36 already? How the hell is that even possible? What Naofumi doesn't realize is that since they have the slave crest on, any boost in experience they're also getting as well. So absorbing all that blood is giving Raphtalia and Philo even more experience. Yes, it's a brutal way of going about things, but damn well it has some insane experience bonuses. She easily kills the new and says that Naofumi can go ahead and absorb the blood, and that's exactly what he does. He tells Raphtalia that she's been doing really good, patting her on the head, saying that he's getting extremely powerful, and he never realized how powerful she was getting. Philo basically runs over and wants attention as well, and he says that she's getting strong as well. They head out and they go to the dressmaker, who obviously makes her the dress that she's been trying to get. And after making this dress, they begin to do tasks basically given by the trader. And the first one is to deliver a herbicide to a village. Naofumi and his party discover though that this village is overrun by monstrous plants. Yep, that's kind of what I thought. So whoever took that tomb, or whoever took that seed out of that tomb, definitely planted it here. They go up to the village and they begin explaining that the seed is actually the seed from the tomb was actually taken by the spear hero Motoyasu, in which Naofumi is not surprised. He is kind of the dumbest of the bunch, and that he tried to end their local famine, but when it sprouted, it came alive and started killing everybody. Naofumi tells them not to worry, that he's an expert scientist in his past world, and he'll be able to figure this out with ease. So with a combination with the herbicide and his blood, he should be able to make a strong enough herbicide to actually kill the plants. And maybe he can even absorb the plants as well. He knows plants don't technically have blood, but they do have, obviously, a substance that is in that. So maybe the water that the plants have been absorbing and is actually in the plants right now, it could be a way for him to absorb the plants. But he'll have to see when they get over there. So he heads over and immediately is able to put that herbicide to use, using Raphtalia and Philo to get close, and a couple other clones that are pretty strong. Gets close, uses the herbicide, and he's able to neutralize the plant entirely and absorbs it. And he realizes that he can absorb all the moisture within the plant. He absorbs all the moisture he possibly can, and there it is. He now has a new cloning ability. It seems like he can actually clone plants in general. So he can make the perfect specimen of planting and farming. He tells this to the village and says that he'll actually give them a couple for free, but he'll give them even more if they pay a small price. So they say they will, paying him a good little sum of money, and he gives them the best possible plants they could possibly have. These will flourish no matter the season. They will flourish no matter what. They'll need to be farmed about every 4 to 5 days. That's how good they are. Naofumi explains this, and they are shocked to hear this and thank him profusely, saying that they're so glad that he can do this for them. He says it's truly no problem. Just remember, Naofumi Iwatani, the clone hero, did this for you. They head off once again, learning of a mysterious disease that is spreading throughout another village. And when they learn of this, Naofumi and his party go to investigate and find out that the disease is actually from a dying dragon, or more like a dead dragon. And this is a perfect time for Naofumi to actually absorb something else as well. This could be super strong. So Naofumi tells the village that they have it handled, and he goes up to actually go check it out. He begins to absorb this dragon, and it starts to come alive, but the absorption process has already started. It seems like the zombie dragon won't actually have enough strength to regain itself. So frankly, this fight is cut short. The zombie dragon is entirely absorbed, and now Naofumi has a clone of this said dragon. And now he chops it up, puts it away into, like, obviously large containers, and gets it and throws it away the best he possibly can, helping the place out entirely. And he explains that he can actually make some plant life here as well if they like, and he'd do a couple for free, and obviously if they want a large sum of it, they'll have to pay, in which they do, of course. And he basically gives them an entire, like, forest of plants, and they thank him so much, and they'll remember his name, Naofumi Iwatani. You helped me so much, we appreciate it. They thank him profusely, and it even helps with the air quality, all the plants and such. With all that done, they've done a lot. Raphtalia, Philo, they're at a level of 40 already, and frankly, they need their class upgrades. On the way back to the kingdom, though, they're actually stopped. Well, because Philo sees someone that she's interested in, and Naofumi is confused, but is fine. It's good to have some playtime every so often. They run over to him once again, and Melty begins to ask if she could possibly be accompanied by them to the capital. And Naofumi says, of course, that he wouldn't mind at all, but she does look slightly familiar. She looks pretty familiar to someone he knows. He can't put his finger on it, but I don't know. Not sure. So they head off toward the capital once again, and when they arrive, actually Naofumi is beginning to basically take Melty away, and Philo and Melty begin to head off and run off on their own. During this time, though, Naofumi begins to talk with Raphtalia, saying that they need to actually get their class upgrades once Philo is done with her play date of some sorts. And she agrees, but as they begin to talk about this, Motoyasu tries to start a fight and attacks Naofumi immediately. Naofumi dodges and parries the attack and says that this is not the time, that he does not want to fight Motoyasu, but he will give him another beating if need be. Motoyasu is pissed to hear this, but as he begins to go to strike again, Philo transforms, running back toward Naofumi, kicking Motoyasu in the nuts, sending him flying. And Naofumi starts laughing, high-fiving Philo, and they just find it super comedic as Motoyasu is sitting on the ground holding his nuts, saying, "Give back Philo. Philo's a slave. Stop enslaving Philo." And Naofumi just rolls his eyes, saying that they have the choice to have that slave crest if they really wanted it on or off, but they say that they want it on. It gives them a boost in power, and frankly, it keeps them more connected to him. They both agree, and Motoyasu is just rocking like a little baby and hurting like hell. Mine is about to say something, but Melty approaches, ordering everybody to stop. And they're confused to see this, and they see that Melty has royal knights right behind him. She explains to Naofumi and her party that she is the second princess, and that she is the heir apparent to the queen, and that because of Malty's toxic personality, or who you call mine, is the reason why she's not the heir apparent to the throne, and that why she is. Naofumi said he knew she looked familiar, but didn't really expect that. But she explains that she hopes that she doesn't basically put a bad light on her just because her sister's not very good. And Naofumi says, of course not. He would never do that. But with that said, he does need to go get class upgrades, so if she doesn't mind guiding him to that direction. Melty says of course and brings them to where they need to go. But when they get to do their class upgrades, it actually seems like the people there, the Three Heroes Church, are refusing to do so. So Naofumi doesn't want to waste any more time and says that they can just go somewhere else. And Melty actually acknowledges this. She explains that over in Shield Frieden that they can actually get their own class upgrades over there. So Naofumi says that after this wave, he'll head over. He hopes that he'll be strong enough for that wave, at least in the meantime. During this time, he begins to start scouting, but also getting better gear for everybody. With only 24 hours before this next wave, he actually needs to be pretty quick about this. So he begins scouting for multiple villages, finding a village that is actually, or not a village, but a bunch of refugees that fled from a revolution that was started by the Bow Hero. So he begins to help them the best he possibly can, giving them all the means to survive, giving them any food they possibly can, or he possibly can. Just all he wants is a small drop of blood from each one of them. And of course they agree. It's something so simple, and all he explains is that it's just for experiments and that he's a scientist, but on top, well, a hero, but a scientist on top of that as well. So they just undoubtedly just believe him, and he gets all of the blood from them as well. After all of that is said and done, he heads back, returning for the next wave, and he encounters Ren and Itsuki, which they accuse him of stealing their rewards, saying that why would he do that? They haven't done anything to him. But Naofumi just explains that Itsuki's revolution went to shit pretty bad. Putting another government in as just as corrupt as the other one, that doesn't mean anything. And Ren, you slayed that dragon, but you didn't clean up the corpse. Like, don't get me wrong, it did help me in the long run, but why wouldn't you clean up the corpse? It's giving off toxic gases to them. And Ren and Itsuki don't even know what to say. They didn't realize this, but Naofumi says it's okay. They can still make up for what they're doing, and it won't matter in the long run because he handled it. But they keep this in mind in the future. Naofumi then leaves, obviously gets better gear, money, stuff like that, talks to Erhard, and the next wave is about to begin. When that next wave begins though, they're all at Lu Village, protecting it and doing everything that he said he would. But after 3 hours, Naofumi seems to be worried. He says that the other heroes just haven't made any progress, so what is even going on? So him and his party head over to check it out, finding that the other heroes are actually arguing about how to defeat this boss. Naofumi is actually frustrated to see this. Why would they be arguing about this? Just do what's obvious. And he tells Raftalia to strike that shadow. She does just that, backing up and seeing the actual boss of this come out, an actual Soul Eater. Naofumi begins to clone as much stuff as possible, and they attack the Soul Eater. Regular people, monsters, the new, anything that shows up begins to attack the Soul Eater. Eventually, they're able to get it down, and Naofumi didn't have to use anything too drastic. He does get some stamina drain when he uses his cloning techniques, so it's good that he didn't have to use too much. But just as he begins to celebrate with his party, another Soul Eater arrives. One appears and begins to try and attack them, but that doesn't actually happen. Something obliterates the Soul Eater, and it's a woman. A woman in a black kimono wielding 2 twin-bladed war fans. The true enemy of this wave has just arrived. You know, all of you are interesting, but you other 3, you're kind of useless. She blasts the other 3 heroes away and stares at Naofumi. You, on the other hand, definitely intriguing. I'm glad you feel that way. But it doesn't matter at the end of the day. You're gonna have to die here. Oh, come on. You don't need to be like that. Unfortunately, I can't die here, honey. And you're gonna have to die in my place. Naofumi stands his ground, and so does his party. And he begins to hold out both of his hands. And this giant clone begins to emerge. Naofumi is cloning the giant zombie dragon he absorbed a while ago. That dragon is now behind him, and the wings begin to unfold in front of glass. Even more clones begin to appear. Any monster he's killed, any person that he's been around and has their blood, These powerful clones stand in front of glass. One dragon, a two-headed dog, various other people, Raftalia, Philo, and even himself. There are clones of them in front of him. Now, talk about killing me. Shall we begin the festivities? How about it, Miss Glass?
As this is stated, the absolute horde of crazy monsters, people, and the giant dragon behind Naofumi charge at Glass, going at her, punching her, and just attacking her, trying to really kill her as she tries to defend. She tries to slice them back, but she really can't. They're overwhelming her far too quickly, as she's quickly swarmed and starting to get attacked, clawed up by the strange dog creatures and the other monsters, and the people, the different cloned people, are punching and attacking at her, kicking her, and just really brutalizing her in general. This goes on for a little bit until she ends up getting some breathing room and blasts herself up into the air, using her kind of war fans to slice down blasts of wind down at the army, but it really doesn't help them as much, as Naofumi is just there cloning more and more and more. He's not stopping, and it is just an endless wave for Glass. And she ends up having to pull back and use other attacks, but it really doesn't help. And when she's about to go for another one of those gigantic blasts that she would go for, she'd stopped, and she feels a tight grip around her body as she sees the dragon grab onto her like she is some toy doll or something, and just throw her into the mountain before launching fire, poisons, and other strange magics at her, damaging her considerably. As this happens, she then gets a notification on her HUD explaining that she only has a few seconds left. And she states this, she sighs in relief, knowing that she'll be able to leave this hell and maybe get stronger. As that happens, those dreams are quickly cut short as she feels a blade go straight through her, with Raftalia up there with the sword, the real Raftalia, down with the sword through her chest, stabbing straight through her, pretty much pinning her to the mountain. As she's laying there, blood starts coming out of her mouth and out of her wounds as she starts coughing up blood and just not realizing what's happening as the life starts draining out of her. While this is happening, she sees on her HUD that she has got 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. As before Raftalia could pull out her sword, Glass then starts being shot up into the sky. As this happens, they're all wondering what's happening. Naofumi sending as many kind of clones at her as he can, but it won't do anything, as the only thing that can reach it is the dragon. As this happens, the dragon goes into swipe and just bites Glass in half, but as that happens, she poofs in thin air. Letting Raftalia's sword drop to the ground as it starts falling, being left back here in this world, which everyone's a little bit confused by, but oh well. As that happens, they all kind of look around, realizing that the wave is finishing. The red skies and the morphing clouds are now starting to go back to normal, and the other heroes stand up in complete fear and terror, really. Motoyasu is terrified, same with Mine. The others are kind of just impressed and shocked that Naofumi has gotten this strong. As they kind of look through all this, they are then sent back to the kingdom, where they are praised by the king for defeating the wave. After this kind of happens, the king excuses the rest of the heroes, leaving Naofumi left in the chamber and left in the throne room with him, where the king demands Naofumi to explain how he is so strong, what's his secret, and he has to spill the beans right now. As stated, Naofumi just sighs, saying that, like, bro, I'm the cloning hero. It's what I do. I create other people. I take their blood, or whatever. I take pretty much anything, and I clone that. I now have an infinite source of pretty much my blood, Raftalia's blood, and anything I have killed or injured. Mostly killed though. And the king isn't satisfied, saying that if he shall not teach, he has to teach the other heroes how to do this. Naofumi just nodding his head, saying firstly he can't, and secondly, why should he? The only ones that have really been good to him have been Ren and Itsuki, and even then, he doesn't think that they are that trustworthy with that power. And Motoyasu is just a complete meathead who only follows kind of around and trusts everything with his willy. As stated, the king starts frowning and scowling, getting mad and angrier until he states that if he shall not kind of teach the heroes how to use this power, then he shall force them. He may not be able to, hurt Naofumi, as Naofumi is by far too strong, but he can hurt his party members, and he shall torture them and pretty much use them as bargaining chips, and if Naofumi doesn't heed his kind of demands, then his party will be killed. As stated, Naofumi just walks up to the king before a blade appears in his hand, reaching the king's throat, nearly grazing it, as Naofumi just tells him to try it, before the blade disappears and Naofumi walks off, walking out of the throne room. And he's just mad. As he's approached by one of the shadows, they give him give him a strange pendant of the Three Heroes Church. Naofumi's a bit confused, but oh well, that's that, he guesses, as he decides to leave and go to Shield Frieden if they're not going to allow him to use the hourglass here. Then he'll go to Shield Frieden or some other country where he can use their hourglass. At this point, Naofumi is quite mad and irritated at this country and pretty much this world, thinking that they're just not good, and they purposely hurt their kind of underlings and their people in order to get what they want. It's not safe for everybody. It's only safe for those in power and up in royal status. Naofumi getting mad at this, thinking that maybe he needs to change this, but he's not sure just yet. Naofumi, he prepares himself. As he prepares him and his party, they then ready themselves before heading off with the rest of his party to Shield Frieden to get his kind of class upgrades for his party at Shield Frieden. As they head off, they're about 5-10 minutes down the track before they're stopped by a group of soldiers led by Melty. As this happens, Naofumi turns around as they start talking. Naofumi kind of asking what they're doing, and Melty explaining that they're going, she asks him if he can reconcile with his father, etc, 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 until suddenly one of the soldiers charges up, stabbing Melty straight in the back, killing her. As she falls over, Naofumi looks down enraged, letting out multiple clones and sending them flying at the different kind of soldiers and beating them to a pulp. Killing some of them, but leaving only a few of them left alive. Not purposely, but just not ending up killing them. As he heads off, running away. As it happens, he takes Melty's body and puts it in the carriage as they kind of dive off, flying, letting out a few more clones of Philo so they can go extra fast as they boost off. As they're in the carriage, Melty's body starts fading away as Naofumi turns to his left. Can you see now? It's obvious that they wanted to assassinate you. Melty, completely confused, is sitting there wondering what happened, and Naofumi explains that, well, they tried to assassinate him. What he did was he let out a astral projection of some sort, or an illusion, so that it looked like they were standing there the entire time. However, what they were really doing was they just went into the carriage while they continued talking, or the two clones continued talking. Naofumi kind of explaining that to the soldiers nothing had changed, and that, well, in their eyes and probably the public's eyes, she is now dead. As they're travelling, Naofumi realizes something, that this country, maybe even this world, he hasn't really seen the other countries, but at least this country that he's in, it is wrong. It needs to be changed, it needs to be better, and it seems that the royalty at this point aren't really keen to change their ways, so he decides that it would probably be best if he used what he originally was starting to think, or do what he was originally thinking of maybe doing, but this assassination attempt has just confirmed it. As Naofumi decides that he is going to take over the kingdom of Melmarak. Over the next few days, while the rest of the heroes and royal guards are trying to chase after Naofumi, as he was kind of framed for murdering the second princess, he is pretty much underneath their noses, right underneath, as while they're searching for them, they're searching in the completely wrong spaces, as he created clones of Raftalia and Philo to go in a certain direction, so that the other kind of heroes and the pursuers chase after the clones instead of him, as he and his party head back to Melmarak's kind of royal capital. As they arrive there, they blend into the crowd, blending in to see what's happening and maybe to execute their plan a little bit earlier. Melty has no clue about this plan and is just dropped off at Elhart's place to pretty much just stay low, as Elhart has decided that he will look after her and keep them safe and pretty much not let anything come through. After all this kind of occurs, Naofumi decides that he shall now be executing his plan. As they hide up at Elhart's place, he sends out a few different clones, a few of them just being shadow puppets of some sort, as he has found that he has got a sort of shadowy ability where he can create figures that are made of shadows that look like people, and then they can turn into the respective clones. Kind of like shadow clones, or yeah, kind of just like shadows that will morph into whatever they were supposed to be. And this happens over the next few days. Naofumi takes down the royal capital from the inside, killing a lot of the lords and the different royal kind of figures that aren't the king or the princesses, because one of them is in his custody and the other one is out searching for him, with the queen being out as well. So Naofumi decides that he shall slowly be taking down the lords and the other soldiers that probably won't be following him in the future. So he takes down lords and different people and replacing them with clones of said lords, killing them all as he sneaks in as well, using some low detection some detection kind of hiding magic to make sure that he's pretty much invisible to everybody around him. As he goes in, killing a bunch of these royals and then cloning them, putting the clone in their stead. As this all kind of happens, Naofumi continues to do this for the next few days, even the next week, until over quite a few kilometers away, or miles, or whatever, Mine and the rest of the heroes are fighting against the clones of Naofumi and his party. As they're going at it, the rest of the heroes realize that they're doing a lot more damage than they should be, as Mosiyasu is getting quite arrogant, saying that, you know, maybe Naofumi has just gotten weaker and they've just gotten a lot stronger and gotten ahead of him. As this happens, he stabs straight through Naofumi's chest before Naofumi poofs into smoke. The rest of the clones poofing as well, as they then realize that they have been duped. As this all happens, they then rush back to the royal capital and arrive a few days later to see that nothing else has really changed. With them arriving, seeing the king standing there and explaining that there has been a change in plans, and that, well, Naofumi is no longer a traitor to the kingdom. The heroes are questioning what's going on, as the king explains that Mine and the heroes are now to be arrested for their crimes against the kingdom. Them being arrested and taken away, with Naofumi going up to the king and thanking him, as the king then puts a thumbs up before poofing into smoke as the people leave. As this happens, Naofumi puts up another king clone. As this kind of happens, he's doing this in front of the heroes, so they realize what happened. And Naofumi kind of explains to them that, yeah, he's taken over the entire royal capital and they're about to join his army. With him walking up to them and pretty much slicing all four of their throats and taking their blood and weapons, absorbing everything into them, or into him, before cloning them all and putting them down there, them pretty much becoming his own subjects. As the queen arrives, she notices something's different, but nothing really drastic, as she notices that the Three Heroes Church is being deconstructed and being taken down, or at least the sigil is. As they're wondering what's going on, the Pope comes out and explains that they have had a change of heart, and that, well, they've realized that the three heroes just aren't enough, and they aren't the true holy ones, and that the shield and the cloning hero especially are the kind of saviors of this world. The Queen is a bit wondering what's going on as she thinks about what happened before walking up to the throne room, seeing Naofumi sitting on the steps as the king is sitting there. Her asking Naofumi directly what is going on before the king poofs. The Queen quickly realizes what's going on before she is then blocked off. The doorway being blocked off by multiple guards as Naofumi walks up to her. Her trembling in fear, thinking that she will be next. As he walks up, he just puts a hand on his shoulder. No need to worry, Miss Queen Morelia. Ah, yes, Queen Morelia Q Melremark. So yeah, anyway, I'm not, if you decide that you want to, continue to rule this place and rule it pretty much with me, I don't really care as long as you're nice and aren't as horrible as your husband and daughter were, then really, I don't care what you do. The Queen then asking where's Melty and did he really kill her, as Melty walks out as well. Her asking if this is the true Melty, as Melty goes up and explains that it is really her, and Naofumi saved her from being assassinated by mine. However, even though she doesn't agree with what Naofumi did, she understands that it was all for the sake of the kingdom, and hopefully the Queen can accept that and be with them and pretty much help him lead this kingdom to the right path. The Queen understands and just nods her head, asking where the rest of the heroes were. Naofumi explaining that, well, long story short, he killed them, but then cloned them. Therefore, they are pretty much under his control, and he can create as many spear, sword, and bow heroes as he'd like. As powerful as the originals, just doesn't have enough HP. Or the same amount of HP as they did before. The Queen understands as they then decide that they need to prepare for the next wave. As Naofumi, the Queen explains that in order to do this, there is a archipelago that only in a few seasons have a very strong kind of amount of monsters that they can fight. Naofumi, hearing this, gets intrigued, asking if today or around now is said season, as she nods her head. To Naofumi, he decides that, well, this could work with him going with his party and a bunch of other adventurers as well, to, level up a bit more. Even though Naofumi is already past level 100 from all of the killing he's done, he has gotten a lot stronger due to his clones being able to gain him levels as well. So Naofumi decides that he needs to go and level up more so that he can get a lot stronger. So he does that. They arrive, they meet these two strange adventurers called Lark and Therese, as they don't see anything different between Naofumi. He says that his name's Naofumi Yotani. They think he's a bit weird, but won't question it. With him splitting off from them and just doing his own training, etc., etc. With him and his party going far past level 100. His party already getting their class upgrades far before the Queen arrived and let them. With Naofumi also getting the kind of heroic weapon that the church had, that being his own personal weapon, as he can change it between the sword, shield, spear and bow whenever he pleases. So he used that to his own kind of advisors, and if you didn't get it already, he murdered all the heroes, the 3 heroes church, and just changed it. So yeah, that kind of happened like that, with Naofumi doing all that. As they go off, they get a lot stronger, murdering a bunch of different monsters, as Naofumi gets way higher of a level, getting far past level 150 and closer to level 170 as the days go by, with Raftalia and Philo getting past the level 100 as well. With this all happening, Naofumi and his party decide to go swimming for a couple days before the thing is supposed to arrive. Naofumi jumping down into the water, with Philo finding a strange building, a sunken cavern or something like that, a strange building under the water. With now her alerting Naofumi, they all go down and arrive in this building, realizing that it is another dragon hourglass, and it says that there shall be another wave in 48 hours at the archipelago. So Naofumi warns the queen about this, as they don't really need to get any soldiers, they just need to get... They do get soldiers anyway, but Naofumi can clone everyone anyway. So they just send out a bunch of ships, and they go out. Naofumi, them building one of the ships, Naofumi just taking the ship and pretty much absorbing it, and creating hundreds of ships to fight the waves. As the hours pass, and it is finally time for the wave to hit, as they're all on the boats and the ships. They are then teleported, with the wave beginning, the sky turning red, the clouds morphing, and strange creatures coming up around the area, them being based around sea creatures. As this happens, Naofumi clones hundreds of thousands of different clones to try and fight these creatures. Him sending out multiple different dragons, and it's really no match, as the gigantic sea monster ends up coming and arriving. The monster boss, or whatever it is, it arrives ready to take down the ships. However, Naofumi doesn't let this happen, as he jumps down himself using the ancient church's weapon, him using it and pretty much turning it to a spear mode and slashing into it before letting out a gigantic attack, blasting the creature into bits, with multiple other versions of himself doing the same, as the creature just explodes from the amount of energy and attacks going into it. As this happens, they think the wave is over, until Lark and Therese, the 2 other strange adventurers, decide that they need to act, them trying to kill Naofumi immediately. However, it doesn't work. As this happens, Lark tries to slice through Naofumi's defenses, however he realizes he doesn't have any. As he tries to slice into Naofumi, Naofumi turns into a cloud, before they are then swamped by hundreds of clones, different monsters, people, other strange creatures just start swamping them, as they can't come back. They can't come back from this before all the creatures are blasted away, with glass coming back down. You can see where she was injured through the chest from Raftalia, and she goes straight towards her, trying to kill her. However, it doesn't do anything. Raftalia is too strong. She goes in, Raftalia slicing down glass and slicing across her chest, drawing blood, and Naofumi appearing next to Raftalia and taking the blood, creating clones of glass. As this happens, Therese and Lark also start drawing blood from the amount of pain they've got, and they start feeling like the blood being... They start seeing Naofumi suck away the blood that they have spilt as well, them realizing what's happening. It's clones of Lark, Therese, and Glass come out and forth as they go and attack the other three heroes. Going in, Therese is the first to fall as a Lark clone comes in and stabs her straight through the back, pretty much killing her. As this happens, Lark has no idea what's happening before he is then dwarfed by a giant shadow as he sees a gigantic dragon. As before he can react, he is sliced across the back of the knees, causing him to not be able to move, as he is then eaten by the dragon, ripped apart as his lower half is just flung from the dragon's mouth, with him swallowing the rest of it. And Glass is the final one to go, with Naofumi himself going up to her and using his weapon, turning it to the bow mode. He shoots like about 10 different arrows at her at the same time, as most of them pierce straight through her before he jumps in front and changes it to the sword mode, slicing off her head. As this happens, he then absorbs all of their kind of bodies, etc, etc, and creating more and more clones. With this all happening, the kind of thing has ended, the wave has ended, and everyone is safe. Like, it wasn't really much of a challenge, since Naofumi is the clone hero and is able to just continuously send out clones of different things. As this happens, Naofumi decides that he needs to stop this front and just become king himself. As he does this, he rules Malmarak, and the rest of the waves aren't really a problem. As the rest of the waves try and take him down, it won't work. As Naofumi and his party and other adventurers and his clones of the other heroes take down any of the waves that arrive, with him ruling equally with the Queen to lead Malmarak to a better future.